Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Edmonton. Live for the first show where Taylor and I are together today on Leadership Line of Sight. I couldn't be more happy to be here in the city of Edmonton. I've been here for a week now, visiting with some of my Edmonton clients, and I have felt welcome. I have felt cold. I have felt the thrill of victory as the Oilers crushed the Ducks last night. And I've got to spend some good quality time with people in person. And it feels really, really good to be in person with clients again and people that I've grown to know and I call friends. It has been a remarkable experience. My first time in Canada, my very first time. And I've learned very quickly that I'm not in Canada, I'm in Alberta. And that says something. The pride of people in Alberta is wonderful, and they're kind, and they're generous, and they're welcome. So it's a pleasure to speak to you live today from Alberta, Edmonton. And not more than 10 minutes ago, I met Taylor for the first time in person. We have been together virtually with you folks for a better part of 3 or 4 months, 5, 6 months now, 20 plus episodes together, and now we're together in studio. So
yeah, it's been incredible. And we literally rigged up this studio in 7 minutes as you were coming in here. I just want to verify that we get the go-ahead from Joel. Joel, are we all clear? Is there anything that needs to be totally changed before we get started here? Oh, I used it for the iPad, so we're out for that. We're going to have no on-screen display. It's literally going to be Scott and I, which is kind of what we wanted for this experience anyway. But if you want to roll some display graphics, I'll lead us in. So welcome to the very first live Leadership Line of Sight. We've made it past that big milestone. Like, you ever hear the term swim past the breakers? Leadership Line of Sight is now past the breakers. That 20 episodes, that first 20 episodes where we find our stride, where we see what's possible, that has all taken place. And really, like, I guess the big question is what did the last 20 episodes mean to you?
Well, we've had so many meaningful conversations. I mean, you think about the people we've had on the show. It's an honor. And it gives me perspective to see how much passion people still have for doing what they do, what they like to do. You know, you can put masks on us, and you can vaccine us and quarantine us and all that stuff, but you can't take away our resiliency as human beings and have passion. And we brought a lot of that passion to the show, and that's been really what's memorable for me.
Yeah, it's incredible to see like the exchange of passion. Like, I think that. Favorite episode?
Well, ladies
from Skylabs, right? So we can.
Innovations was amazing.
So we know that's hands down, right?
Yeah.
And when we take a look at what type of exchange we got to have with those people, what they're learning about themselves is that will shape them into leadership. But we're also learning the same thing from the other side. Like, go from the Luke Skywalker side over to the Yoda side, and you get somebody like Richard Castleberry, who's talking about how his program, his a full-time MBA program at Texas A&M University, is designed for what those girls are going through. It's designed to show you who you are as a leader by putting you in leadership positions. Now, talk to me about that for you. So right now, just to kind of reiterate it, you're the Chief Change Officer at Crankset Group. You sit down with some of the most remarkable minds in some of the most powerful positions, and you talk to them about being better leaders, about their blind spots. Now, talk to me about the first time, or maybe early on, when you started to understand who you are as a leader.
It's a great question. So I read a book by Ayn Rand called Atlas Shrugged. And that book was a life changer for me. And I was in management school at the time, right, at University of Central Florida, trying to get 3 degrees, which I did. And I went to work for a pool company. We put the hardscape in, concrete around the pool decks. And in Florida, in Orlando, which is where the school is and where I was working, every house has a pool deck. So you just went from one to the other. There's new subdivisions going on. I'm working for the pool. I got a crew of 8 guys there. No leadership. There's no leader. And it's getting late in the day, and we got to finish this deck. Like, you know, when the boss says get numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 done, you get them done. You get this hot, humid sun all day that you're working and you're pouring mud, and your truck pulls up late. We got all the forms set, we're waiting around a little bit, and labor's a big deal. And this guy in particular, you know, he wouldn't pay you necessarily as much as you should have gotten for the hours you worked if you didn't get it all done, right?
Yeah.
And this crew that's there with me, you know, these are folks that these families needed this money. They needed that full check, right? And so you picture this sort of acreage of new homes going up, right? The half finished, you know, and then the backyards are all dirt. And then you look down, it's pretty much as far as you can see, and there's just pool decks going. We didn't have all the contracts. The guy pulls up late, put the mud down, concrete, those that don't know. And we get about 3/4 of the way done. And we're out of concrete. And I've been watching off in the distance throughout the day this one guy doing the same job that the 8 of us were doing, 7 of us were doing. He's doing it by himself. And it's painstakingly slow. But I also see that he's got 2 trucks of mud down there. And he's been pouring. So you know, he's got a little bit, it's got to go pretty quickly because it dries, and you got to keep the truck spinning, or otherwise it dries up. So it's kind of a fast application. He's been on it all by himself all day. And we're out of mud. And so I remember going back to the truck. I can remember this moment like it was yesterday when you asked me this question. And I went to grab the radio. And I remember what Ayn Rand had taught me in Atlas Shrugged. And I remember what I was learning in management business school. And I remember this moment. It's like I'm telling it right now. I said, I looked in my reflection in the windshield, and I said, here we go. And I picked up the radio and I said, Scott DeKevin, go ahead, what do you want? I got a crew of 7 here standing by. I'm out of mud, but I got a guy about 4 decks down that's working by himself and has 2 trucks and probably too much mud. I'm going to swap my labor for his mud. We're going to finish both decks. You're going to pay the extra hour overtime. I'm going to get the job done, and all is going to end well. That. Do it. That was that one.
So as soon as you knew that you could bring the solution, you could bring it up the chain, or you could make the chain.
Yeah. Easy to change.
Yeah, yeah. I remember for me, I remember getting in trouble as a kid. I got in tons of trouble.
Yeah.
I got detained a couple of times. It was a bad scene. But in the mix, the thing that I learned is that when we got in trouble, when we were in deeper than everybody else could handle, they all looked to me. And it was wild that way, to think that like we all had to go in for like interrogation, or when we were in I remember specifically, like, we used to go in park places and drink, and if you're drinking around a car, it's just a bad scene, right?
Right.
And so the police ended up pulling over somebody, and they pulled them over right into the place we were going. And I looked at my friends, and we all knew that like the number was up, right? We weren't going to have enough time. And I forgot about this story until somebody told it back to me a couple of months ago. I ran out of the car and into the field and started a tractor to cause a diversion of me taking off in this tractor to distract the police. And my friends were like, we would have been in this much trouble, and you would have been in this much trouble. And I was like, yeah, but nobody got in trouble. You know, the tractor moved a little bit, the police got freaked out, you guys got away, and so did I.
Yeah.
And that's just how it went. And sometimes I didn't get away. Sometimes I was the one who didn't get away.
To your point, leadership's to a degree in everyone. It's in my opinion, it's in all of our DNA to have a leadership mindset.
Yeah, but it comes with taking responsibility for more than you. So many people come into entrepreneurship and they're solopreneurs, right? And that means that they can do what we were describing. You can build a chain, but not enough for other people to really kind of work on. But the ability to build structures outside of yourself is what you did that day. You said, I can solve the problem and save us all, right? And the same thing, in those moments, I was actually sacrificing myself for the group. And that's the difference. Like when the greatest teams out there, they don't operate the best when they feel as though everybody around them is cheering them on. It's when they'll have their ankles. Like it's when you'll save me if I go too far. Right?
But and there's an essence of, you know, there's no riskier choices. There's just different choices that have different risks. And when you can really operate in a world where you understand the risks and you're willing to and have the courage to know you're going to have to take a type of risk, then it's just about executing.
Yeah, like that's what they talk about with the hero story, is they say that we're all questionable characters, right? In the moment, there's nobody that's, you know, like metaphorically slayed a dragon that wasn't terrified of the dragon and pretty much convinced this was the end of them, right? That was the risk. But it was after that moment they engaged.
Yeah.
That's like the difference, right?
Yeah, and fear, right? So every time you put a leadership mindset, every time you're a leader, every time you're in a position to lead others, yourself, large organizations, sports teams, youth soccer, youth hockey, which I got to visit this week on Monday. I got to go to one of the rec centers and I was sat next to a hockey mom, right? Way to go Hawks, by the way. Well done. The reality is that there's a moment of fear. It's a brief moment. And what I always say is to meet your moments. And when you meet your moments, turn your fear to focus. And if you can take that fear and turn it into a focus energy, you will not only lead into, you will always lead through.
Yeah, I like what you're saying at the end there. Like they always talk about swing through, right? Swing through your target, or aim higher than you think you want to go.
Punch through the wall.
Punch through. Yeah, totally. And that's the idea is that if you focus on the obstacle, it will be an obstacle. If you focus past the obstacle, that's like where execution often happens. But so many people get tied up in that fear, right? Like like those gut check moments when you're like, hey, listen, like for salespeople, it's the pitch. I guess for almost everybody, it's the pitch, whether it's ideas to the people that you work for. I think we all know the feeling, right?
Yeah, but it's also internal. It's emotional. Right? You look at things inside first. How do I feel about it? What is it going to feel like if this happens or that happens? And we're entering a time where right now, and I like to stay and live in the present, we're entering a time right now where innovation, where you take something that exists and improve it, right? For the betterment of society or to do it more efficiently or effectively. There's been this, you know, a lot of talk about innovation. One of the things I've learned this week about being and visiting some great companies and meeting great people in person, finally, and being present to it, is it's not about innovation. It's about imagination. We've got to go back to imagining what it should look like, to really thinking in terms of imagination. We're not going to get everybody back in the office. We're not going to let everybody stay at home. So imagine what that looks like the right way for your organization. And leadership right now I don't care what business, we can throw up graphs and, let's hammer at any of them really. How are your people imagining we're going to be together? How are your people imagining we're going to be able to execute together? Imagine that, open that conversation, and then let's figure out what our initiatives are and go take them down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so many people, when the stomach drops, right? Like you hear the term, you lose your stomach for this or so on. That moment is the gut check moment. I really hope that I'm able to help like my daughters understand what that is, right? That moment of fight or flight.
Yeah.
Fight or flight is not something that we often need to choose between.
Yeah.
But our body screams it in that moment.
That's exactly right. And everybody learns when they're disoriented. Right? That's when you're in the learning mode. And right now we're all disoriented, but we're coming to the end of it. The second thing, and I think this is super critical to remember, is that at the end of every moment, there's another one. And you can make decisions that are two-way door decisions where you can walk through and that's a bad decision and walk back through the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Or you make one-way door decisions. You walk through it, it's closed, you're done. We have a collage, endless galaxy of two-way door decisions. Make them, fail forward, learn from your loss. You don't lose, you learn. Okay, that didn't work. Admit the humility back up, right? Balance sheets on these companies are strong. Cash, that's in these accounts is strong. I understand, we'll get into the economics of a later show, but the bottom line is it's okay to make mistakes as long as you make them together. And that's leadership today.
So some people call it relationship over transaction or connection over transaction. I like that term for it. But the main thing is like, how can you fail without breaking apart? Because it's way easier to come apart than it is to stay together.
Right.
Like so many people are thinking about hiring people like they're going to stay here forever, and who just learned their lesson on that.
Right.
And so instead, why not really value the time we have together? But more so, like when we keep talking about hiring the right people, the idea is to hire the people that you want to develop.
Right.
If you hire people for jobs, then they're going to eventually leave that job as they develop, or you're going to starve them of development. Like, what are the options here?
That's right.
And so now with so many people that are in the learning phase, because we've talked about the Great Resignation, those people that are kind of in flux right now, that are like, there is confusion. Fuel costs more. Groceries cost more. The government says that they're going to make changes to interest rates. It's safe, but it wasn't yesterday. All of these things keep pushing us into that mindset of fight or flight, right?
Right.
But the thing we have to remember is that these aren't leopards and we're not monkeys.
That's right.
And
it's a two-step process. There's clarity here. The first step to get there is to eliminate the word fault from the ecosystem. Whose fault? Whose fault? Purge it. And instead, insert a core value. And don't get me started on relooking at core value and vision and mission right now, because it all needs to happen. But instill in your culture. I don't care about the company size. I don't care about what industry. If it's an organization, it's not who's right. It's what's right. And if we stumble to get to what's right, and somebody takes us the wrong way, that's not their fault. We're still headed towards what's right. Right? Mm-hmm. Dan Price was on CBS this week, and they asked him, Mercury Payment CEO, great guy, and a maverick. They asked him, what's driving the stock market right now? And he says, well, greed. It's just wealthy people trying to make as much money as they can as quickly as they can. End of interview. Right? He's right. Mm-hmm. That's what's right. That's what Wall Street is.
What does Warren Buffett say about when everybody's greedy?
I've got more Warren Buffett quotes in my head. I'll let you finish that one.
He says that that's when you should be afraid.
Right.
And he also says that you should be greedy when everyone else is afraid. So is this the flow state before the ebb state?
You know what else he did this week? Sold his interest in Visa International, or I get it wrong, Joey, correct me. and started to buy into $1 billion, I believe, investment into a bank that's in the crypto space. This is a guy who's anti-crypto.
Yeah, like I heard his partner, yeah. So Charlie Munger was talking about how like undesirable crypto is.
He calls it the devil. He
does
not have an interest in any of that.
So is this a signal that even if it is the devil, it's now the devil we know?
Well, what does Warren Buffett do for his shareholders?
He wins.
Right? It's not who's right, it's what's right.
Yeah, and that's the fault thing. I also think that it's like part of presence of mind. So we know that if we let our mind live in the past, it's depressing. And if our mind lives too much in the future, it's anxiety. And so that's the value of presence of mind. Now, when you talk about faults, that's a past tense thing. Who's at fault? Who did this? Now, I don't think there's a lot of people that associate this, but that's stealing your own momentum. Stopping, turning around to like take apart something. Instead, couldn't you coach the future version of that person to maybe build a solution?
Right, because there's no such thing as fault. What did we learn?
Yeah.
Good job, Taylor. Thanks for setting up the cameras 10 minutes before we got on here. And we're just got stuff taped to the walls at this point. We learned a lot. We learned that we need to set up earlier. We learned together.
Mm-hmm.
In the old way of thinking, oh, you're fired. You're out of here. You don't even know how to set up the studio. And you just took a brilliant mind and cast it out.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't really evaluate the value of what they're upset about. You know, I always feel that so many people, first, the illusion is that everything's urgent. And that's one of the things that allows me that space to resist fight or flight, is most of the stuff I think is urgent. Like if I think about, like, if I don't respond to this right now, what happens? If I don't respond to this by tomorrow, what happens? That's something that's kind of clear. And then, is this significant? So if I wind this 1 month in advance, how do these possible decisions game out? And then the last one, is it substantial? If I wind out 10 years ago, how does this moment matter? And I find that gives me kind of some scope to see which things I should be responding to, because otherwise it's just whatever irks me.
Right. Well, here's the thing. First of all, fight or flight. You were talking about your hope you can teach your daughters that. We'll put them in the moments where they have to experience fight or flight. And flight might be in the daddy's arms. I have a daughter who's had an extraordinary life so far. She's 23 now. She lives in DC. And I put her, one day we'll have her on the show, she'll enjoy it. I put her in some situations, I'll just let her tell the story when you meet her. But now she has met her moments. So we prepare by the behavior, by putting him in those situations, right? Mm-hmm. And I always told her that courage is just one step.
Yeah.
One step. Just take that one step. You're scared of parachute and go up in the plane. Take the one step out.
Totally.
Just one step. So you teach courage, you know, and to how it applies to businesses today. Isn't that the point? Everybody needs to have an imagination, and everybody needs to try to fail forward together, right? But we're getting some clarity now in the markets, in my opinion. And I've spent a lot of my time with some pretty big CEOs discussing what it looks like downrange right now. And
Tell me more.
Yeah. So right now, you've got to really look at the labor markets. Everybody's recruiting. So don't recruit. Well, we got to get people in here. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's get our people together and figure it out. I've seen some very creative solutions. I'll share one with you. There's a company later today here in town that's having the Olympics, human curling. And the HGA Group is, you know, a brand that I think is pretty well known here in Edmonton, as it should be. And so everybody at 4 o'clock this afternoon is going to be human curling and things of that nature. And their COO, Rachel Haynes, does a phenomenal job there. But of course, the marketing department will be there, take some content, do some live stuff. So there's this whole company that knows they're doing this to have fun, but they're all in the recruiting mindset. Right? Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. And so that's creative. That's creative. I'll give you another one. Difficult decision. going back into the database of resumes with a different mindset. Who is the person? Look for the character in them. Don't look for the proficiency. Look for the good people. You have somebody who's a great person, but doesn't necessarily have all these skills that you need to do the job. Bring in the good person and let everybody help that person gain those proficiencies. People want to learn new things right now. They want to do new things. They want to experience new things. They want it to be new. They want it to be fresh. We're on the backside of a black swan event, the biggest medical black swan event since the Spanish flu of 1918. You know what came next?
The boom.
The Roaring 20s.
Yeah, yeah.
We're in the Roaring 20s right now.
See, the opportunity is driving me wild. Like, I'm an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. And when I was just talking about this in the meeting before this podcast, in that I used to, like, growing up, National Geographic was like the first channel I'd go through. Like, going and seeing what was going on in the Serengeti was maybe more important to me as a kid than it should have been.
Yeah, until those poor wildebeest had to cross the river with the crocs on the other side. I was done with it after that.
And I looking at the holistic nature of it, they always talked about how hard it was during the dry season and how restrictive it was and how everybody was in a pit just to survive. It was just like a war of attrition, right? And then there's the moment when the rain comes. And the rain comes and it all gets good. You know, like suddenly everything changes and outlooks change, and this is the rain, right? Like what we're probably going to see that pendulum swing back and forth between feast and famine in ways that are three-dimensional, right? And so I'm actually really excited for that because I'm the crocodile, you know, and I think that there's going to be ways that value is going to exchange. And that hiring thing is so exciting to me right now. The algorithm trying to solve in my head is how we could reduce the onboarding and startup of domestic virtual assistants. This is like my next, this is my next thing, is how do you mobilize an army from everywhere now that we learned what's possible? We sent the people we had home. We said to the people that we already worked with that our environment is changing. When did we say that they're still right for this new environment? Like a lot of them said, hey, listen, you guys, like my wife's grandfather passed away last week.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm sorry to hear that too, but I am such a fan of Grandpa Bob. Grandpa Bob did whatever he wanted, right? He was 89. He lived in his own house right till the very end.
Good for him.
He, like the things that he wanted to be. And when his company came to him, oh man, I think it was in the 80s, and he worked for the land titles office. And they said, hey, we're bringing in a computer system. And he said, you guys were talking about early retirement packages. Where do you keep them? And he was out, right?
Yeah.
And so now imagine that when the configuration that wins in football changes, you need a different team. Like we learned this from how the Patriots used to reconfigure it all the time, right? And so now we're going to learn that in business. That first off, virtual assistants and the way that they work is very valuable. And also having people that are familiar with what happens here is very valuable. So domestic virtual assistants, I think, is going to be like it's going to be the cat's pajamas.
So as you know, I coach high school football presently, but it's definitely my life's passion. And we practice sudden change every practice when there's an interception or a fumble, turnover of some kind, and just came off the field as a defense, and all of a sudden you hear the fans and just pick up your helmet and go. We practice that every day. So when it happens in a game, it's like no big deal. You know, on television at home, you're throwing Doritos against the screen, right? If you're on the other side of that. But on the field, it's just, we practiced it. We need to practice sudden change together. And that sudden change and sudden shifts, the ability to, for pivots to happen multiple times at multiple layers in organizations, regardless of their size, every day, right? I was sitting next to the CEO of one of the companies last night at the Oilers game. Actually, one of the directors, great guy named Alex Lee. He's tasked with a pretty big charged to just stir up a new division over there. I'll let them speak to it. But just, I don't know. I just got to make all these decisions. I said, you do? And he always knows when it's coming. They call it getting Connors, Scott Connors. Anyway, I said, you do have to make all the decisions? He goes, all right, we have to make all those decisions, right? I said, well, how many you got to make a day? And as we're doing this, we're watching the puck kind of go back and forth, and we're watching the ice, and it's the Oilers Arena, get the big screen up there, and we get to see the replays and whatnot. And I said, does it feel like a lot of decisions? He goes, yeah. And as that's happening, McDavid's coming off the ice. And I looked at Alex and said, how many decisions did he just make in that 30-second shift? Put it into perspective. What is a decision? So to take virtual assistants and make them a part of our culture, business culture, start with who would be the best character to do that. And all of a sudden you start to break it down to reliable, accountable, accurate, timely, well-spoken. And I'm starting to describe my mom. How many stay-at-home moms do we have? So let's talk to them and see if maybe that's something they might be.
The flexibility that could be worked out there, that win-win, is definitely going to be available. But I think that the thing that we, like before was something that we just talked about and now is paramount, is that trust. Like, remember when we had Quentin on?
Yeah.
So Quentin Gardner from HGA, that's the first thing he was talking about when he's saying like the good fit for his company is people that are high in trust. Those are the people that are going to do well. The skills and everything can change.
Right.
And that's the same thing with this next movement, is find the people, like in the past we've called it trust, loyalty, who will be a stakeholder. But the idea is, frankly, the people that do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah. And look, there's only one way to build trust. And every advisor out there, every scholar out there can come at me with any argument they want. There's only one way to build trust, through shared experience. So let's share some experiences together.
I totally agree. Now, normally in our podcast, we are in front of screens where we can see the news as it drops. And Joel has now rigged it up for us so we can kind of glance over here. Thanks, Joel. Billionaire George Soros shed positions in Amazon and Alphabet before January's tech sell-off and took stakes in Rivian and Peloton. What do you see?
Well, first of all, profit taking is part of the profit making, right? And that's what happened with him declining, just shedding some of those positions in the bigger techs. The second part is where he put the money. Look closely at where he put the money. He put the money into electric trucks. Rivian's got a beautiful vehicle. I don't know if we have a picture of it, but it's a beautiful vehicle. But there's money in there. Even Amazon's got it. And Peloton. The company got hammered. Had some big bad PR. I think someone got hurt, one of the celebrities, on the Peloton stock just, and then people are going back to work, they're going back to the gym, and so there's a whole story of slide, and then the CEO stepped down. Well, that's a bottom. So you buy at the bottom and you sell at the top. Simple strategy, right? But the point is, look at the opportunities. How is he problem spotting? And problems are opportunities. So he saw opportunities. He invests in opportunities. And we need to invest in opportunities. All of us need to invest in opportunities in our businesses right now. Recognize your opportunities and invest in them. I totally agree.
Adjusting over time. We're adjusting Scott's mic.
Gotcha.
So when it comes down to those moves, the buy low, sell high, these positions are very good, but it's also interesting to see that that's the end of a CEO cycle. Like, CEOs have cycles. A lot of people don't see that, right? But when they ride the stock up and all the strategy is designed for this market where Peloton has access to funds that would have been used for travel before, would have been used for personal trainers and gyms. So they had an available market that now is changing and contracting and going in different ways. Riding a bike in your house was so pandemic.
Exactly.
And so either those leadership can see the writing on the wall and they can engage you, right?
Right.
And say, like, we need a big sweeping change.
Yeah.
And if they don't make that change, they become that change.
That's right.
The end of a CEO is when they can no longer hear the music of the future. When the board no longer believes that they can meet the future and meet the win, that's it.
Right. You have problems. Two things. Boards make this problem all the time. They think they know better than everyone that works in the business, and so they decide to remove a CEO without actually talking to the people. That's a mistake a lot of times, and sometimes a fatal one. The work that I do with CEOs, though, we have to be in the present, and we're certainly planning for the future. But what are we building for? What is our inevitable exit strategy? The top is the top, right? So what are we building for? We're building legacy. What legacy did we leave behind? What outlasted my tenure here at this organization? What do you want it to be? That's what you build for. That's your vision as a CEO. And when you have a pandemic and you have supply chain constraints and you have geopolitical and domestic political and all the things that we're dealing with, last thing you're thinking about is legacy. And it's the only thing you should be thinking about.
Yeah. Like even writing your own eulogy would give you scope on what you wanted to create that would outlast you. Or maybe if you wanted to take kind of a harsher view at it, why not print off all your bank records and your calendar and give it to someone else, and then you're not allowed any explanation.
Right.
Who are you based on where you spend your time and when you spend your money and nothing else?
Yeah. Yeah. And the line of sight, the leadership line of sight is, how did I help my people? How many legacies did I help build by building mine? That's when it feels good, when the board says, hey, thanks, but no thanks. You smile, you start your Porsche, you drive to your yacht, right? You take it to the island, you hug your wife and child and go, I'm not leaving again.
See? But that's what we all wanted. Like I'm convinced that entrepreneurs were the same people that used to sail the seas, right? The people that found the spice and brought them back and everything else like that. I think that that's why we call it entrepreneurships. And here we talk to people from rowboats to rocket ships. Right. And to see how those different ships are going to have to move in this next period of time. It's almost like pre-pandemic, everybody had their different spots to fish. And you had these giant corporations over here and the small rowboats closer to the beach. And in between, you had some businesses like mine. I kind of run like a schooner. You can't get it off the beach without 3 people. But if you have 7, you can beat the crap out of those bigger ships. And now, like running my real estate company in combination with a marketing company, like, it's like having a ship with a helicopter. Yeah. And these are the things that are about to shift massively, is because all of a sudden, all of the boats are stacked up like Peloton was on where the fish were. Right. Okay. Right. And the competition there is massive, as well as the absence of opportunity, because all these other things are unlocking. It's almost like different food sources for the fish, so they move. Right. So who will be the one that can, maybe in my example, use their helicopter to scout?
The ones that stay the course. We're all going to the same place. We're just not all starting our journeys at the same place. Define your success and stay the course. Do it with good core values. Let that guide your decision. Is it moral? Is it correct? Is it honest? Is it transparent? And for me, in a personal one, how does it help solve the environment?
So I want to add some scope to that in saying, like, you were saying to keep your eye on the prize, make sure that you have that and ingrained, right? And then when we say stay the course, when everything around you seems to all of a sudden like have lost its solidity, the idea is to retain your goals by changing your strategy. Right. And that's where we're really getting a lot of movement now. Right. Now, Joel's brought up something else here. Over the last decade, Bitcoin has become less speculative. Now, this is one of the big things that's going to affect all those ships. So I just want to, you were talking black swan events. I keep painting this picture for people just to see their reaction. And here's the picture. We see inflation moving in ways we haven't in decades. And they're traditionally, the way they've stopped this is to raise interest rates. And because interest rates are at historic lows, I believe that they think they have amazing brakes, right? Look how much they could technically move interest rates over a period of time. They can move little notches. How much does that brake pedal work when a lot of the money that takes to put pressure into that system moves into crypto?
Yeah, you're on the mindset here, but I want to be real clear about some things here when it comes to inflation. We used to have a cyclical economy, counter-cyclical, right? When the economy is expanding, you raise interest rates, and you raise them high enough that the economy starts contracting. And then you start to lower them enough so that the economy can come back to expanding. And you meet this period in here called a recession. So it used to be a circle, right? And this circle was cyclical. And interest rates go up when you're expanding, and they go down when you're contracting. And then early 90s, we engineered what's called a soft landing. So now the circle became an oval. You have long periods of sustained controlled growth, right? 3.8, 2.8, under 4, and then something happened bad, like the dot-com bubble, right? And then you come around, and then something really good happens, right? And then the economy just takes off. And so there's these events, these positive and negative events that swung around the track. So you have an oval. And that period in the middle, that line that's straight, where everything's just good, that's what we saw before the pandemic. We haven't talked about raising interest rates in a decade, since 2011, I believe. This is important. This is not inflation. Let me say that again and look into camera. This is not inflation. This is, watch me here, overstimulus met by supply chain constraints, predominantly COVID related. And at the sake of time, I won't go into an example. I think everybody gets it. So you got this overstimulus. There's all this liquidity in the market, all this extra disposable income. Asset prices go up. People buy you bought new clothes. You bought a new watch. You probably tried to buy a new car, but because of the supply chain, there was a chip shortage, so the prices kept going up, even though it was too expensive. And so here comes the stimulus, and now the stimulus is starting to do this because it's waning. And you can see the liquidity dropping out of the market. At the same time, the supply chain constraints that we've been dealing with are starting to heal themselves. And there's validity to the point that some corporations just raised prices because they knew they could. And there's other ones that had to raise prices because unit costs went up. Cost per unit went up. But right now we're here. We're at that apex. And if you leave it alone, companies will lower their prices, and the ability to spend money that's not in the system will bring prices down together. And you'll do it like this. You put brakes on that, and it does that. And the bottom will drop off. So I hope the Federal Reserve and the World Center Bank and the governments around the world are hearing me right now. Don't raise rates. Let the market find its new equilibrium. And if you do raise rates, an eighth, please, just the thought of you raising rates and this leaning toward raising rates and tightening monetary policy, look what it's doing to the market. That's where I sit on inflation.
Yeah, and I really think that you're describing something that's probably a pretty accurate picture. So based on what I know about governments, just wait for the bottom to go out?
So the bottom won't go out if you wait.
No, if I was the government.
Oh, yeah.
But me not being the government traditionally doesn't make awesome decisions when it comes to this stuff.
You know, ego is not your amigo pervades the government. The whole
government.
Yeah,
so it leads me to start to speculate that when the bottom falls out, where's going to be the opportunity past the threat?
So I don't view it as a threat. View it as an opportunity and pay close attention. And when you don't have all the answers, look closer. Sometimes be patient.
That's fair. So we're seeing Warren Buffett go into crypto. We're seeing Bitcoin start to stabilize and be considered more generally acceptable. I talked to the CEO of Proppy, which is a digital real estate company in the States that is setting records. And she had sent up an Instagram the other day saying that it used to be so rare that you would ever see crypto advertised anywhere, that she remembers the moment she saw a little crypto ad appear in Times Square in New York. And now it's become commonplace. And she thinks about how internet access used to be like that. It used to be these specific points, and now it's everybody in their pocket. The world is changing, and it could be that we see this digital movable currency run that way. But my goodness, like, the hardest thing about emerging markets is regulatory change that suddenly changes everything. And the thing that I can't get past is, because the way blockchain works is it records everything. If you slip up and the regulations reveal later that what you were doing was very negative and punishable, it's not a paper trail anymore, man.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like that's written in stone now.
Yeah.
What's the statute of limitations on money laundering in the blockchain? I don't know that there ever will be one.
Right. You know, the whole question of regulation, I think, is really outside the vast majority of scope for most businesses. And the, even discussion of accepting cryptocurrency is really not on radar yet in a big way with your traditional businesses. But I will say this, the fact that, I come here to Canada and my dollar is worth $1.30 of yours, and the fact that Bitcoin takes that out of the equation, or crypto takes that out of the equation, all I have to do is feel that accepting Bitcoin from Canada, for my Canadian clients, my Albertan clients, right, my Saskatchewan clients, just accepting it, what's my risk on the other side of that transaction? And as you saw on that graph before, it's starting to stabilize, starting to get into that range where it's like, oh, it's between this and this. Now it doesn't cost you $1,500 Canadian when I'm charging you $1,000 a month.
Yeah. And I find that, like, the business without borders is a big thing, but also the discretion. So in places like Vancouver and Toronto, there's a bunch of empty houses because people from China bought them as a way to park their money here. Canadian real estate's a really good bet and has been historically, but it ends up with huge problems for a city, meaning that when big properties like estate properties are vacant, people end up living there that you don't know about, especially when the owners never check on the place. Something breaks, insurance, like what happens when a $6 million property all of a sudden becomes condemned?
Right.
Like, there's a lot of question marks. So they started putting rules and ordinances against this, but it helps me, like, looking at where you can see alignment. Millennials right now that want to live in that place can't afford it. Right. And you've got this pain point of people putting their money over here into risks where the property could degrade or get occupied. Just stack them up.
Right.
Shouldn't those people over there, couldn't they own 49% of it?
Right.
In which case they get to put their money in here?
Right.
And couldn't they do that through digital so it could be discreet, which is what they need to be protected from their own government?
Right.
And then on the other side, couldn't we talk to somebody like Joel? We mentioned Joel a lot, and just to give you some context, Joel is our live producer. He's in studio here making sure everything runs. He's got his clock up on there so that he can let us know that we're about to post. We've only got a few minutes left, and I appreciate you. But Joel, like, if somebody came to you and said the average property in Vancouver is $1 million, and the affordability is like 11 to 17 times the average household rent, and then I came along and said, hey, listen, these nice Chinese people are going to buy 49%. You can buy the same place for $510,000. And the only thing you have to do is sign this agreement saying that you won't do stuff that devalues the house. Yeah, who would not?
Right.
So, like, the business without borders and the discretion is key to, like, the global interest in crypto.
Think about it this way, how we started the show. That's imagination. That's what's going to drive us forward right now. We have to think in terms of imagination. 5 years ago, what you just said, most people would have scrolled right past us.
I can't get past the thought of, like, going back to myself as a 7-year-old and be like, listen, in the future, you're going to have to remember 40 magic words, and it's going to activate this magic stick to video game money. Right? Like, this is the world we live in now.
That's right.
And by the way, this video game money is going to be specifically important when you leave this universe into the other one.
Yeah. imagination.
Could you imagine leaving a note for like, from the future to someone in the past like that?
Yep.
Like the DeLorean seems like a really acceptable idea now, but comparison.
Well, how about fusion as the fuel? How about taking trash and putting it? Aren't we doing that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not Back to the Future.
Well,
it's
really,
now.
like even when you take a look at what Star Trek looked like to us, like we all have the devices in our hands now. Yeah. We actually built them to look the same with the black screens and like the other. Like it's so crazy.
I just want someone to get the transporter. I want the transporter. I want to get into my little transporter in the kitchen, Joel, and I want to end up right back here next Friday.
We're gonna do live podcasts every week. Scott's just got to get a transporter.
That's right. Just imagine that.
No, let's just do let's work a little bit less futuristic and get the tube. Elon's tube?
Yeah.
That'd bring you here in what, like 37 minutes?
I can go to Calgary on the Red Arrow in 3 hours and work the whole way.
Yeah. And the Red Arrow is the deluxe. Yeah. Before that was the big gray dog.
Oh, is that what it was? I didn't know that. That's great.
So let's talk a little bit more into the future. So here you are in Edmonton.
Yeah.
You're visiting some leaders here that are making changes because this is the hub of change right now. Like this is the last affordable place. This is the last place to pop off. And we've got a lot of attention right now. Like with what it means, given what's taking place in Russia to the primary income here. Things are looking very interesting.
Yeah. This is a great, I don't know, call it a town or a city. I don't know. You guys are kind of
about 1 million people.
And so I think
that's a neighborhood in the States.
Yeah. Yeah. I say to companies all the time, you're in a danger zone. They're looking at me like, uh-oh. I'm like, you're too big to be small and too small to be big. That's dangerous, right? This reminds me of that very acronym. This town is too big to be small, but it's too small to be big.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's not the danger zone when it comes to places to live. I think that's nirvana because you got the best of both.
It's the butter zone?
Yeah. The butter zone. I like that.
I have to say that it's interesting here. And the thing that I find so interesting is how dynamic it is. Like I was talking to Kara Bedford a couple of weeks ago, and she's I think she's the CMO of CompuVision. And about the marketing perspective, and you meet so many people here that are incredibly dynamic, like the founders of Eris that I work with are Edmontonians, a lot of the people that they introduced us to, and you start to realize, one, how young this population is. Yeah. This is the youngest major population in Canada, and I don't know how far outside of that. So everybody here keeps talking about oil, whereas energy, like this group can do whatever you put them to.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're retrainable. Like when we didn't have as much oil field, we redeveloped our city. We have skyscrapers twice as tall as the ones that I would have grown up with.
Yeah.
And that was a very good time to make that change. But now look at what's here.
Yeah.
Look at the infrastructure, the affordability, the tax structures, all of the things to make Alberta, like set Alberta on fire. And we've seen it before.
Yeah. And your way of life and learning about university. Is that right down the street, learning about how you intern right after college with a company. It's kind of your final year of school, sitting in your arena, watching 10-year-olds play hockey and seeing that community, that sense of community. Companies, big ones, should really seriously consider that if we're going to do this and we want to move everybody and we want to relocate, and if ever there was a time to do it, I think Edmonton deserves serious consideration.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's been looked past over the last 2 years for sure. The most mediocre real estate market of the pandemic, but now it's here. Now the numbers here for real estate look like I've never seen before.
And you've got land to build. You guys have land to build.
Yeah, it's actually the lowest population density pretty much in North America.
And the best water.
Yeah, we do pretty well that way.
It's good water.
Good water. Yeah, it's nice to be from a cold place. That's actually one of the biggest things that I like about being from a cold place. Warm people.
Yeah.
You know what? When somebody pulls over here, so do other people.
Yeah, you know what else happens here? And I hope the entire United States of America is listening to me. On on-ramps, you actually let people on. It's great. You actually just say, you can see them slow down. I'm like, wow, that is so nice of you.
Okay.
Yeah, United States, you're just, you get that kind of, that kind of thing going.
I love Alberta culture. Like, as much as like some other people might use some terms that we don't agree with for who lives here, a lot of people say that the drivers here are super aggressive. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They're like those
Yeah.
Alberta drivers.
No.
They're just wild.
No.
And meanwhile, we're talking to our friend from the south, and he's saying, actually, you guys haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, but there's also, I will say this, you've never seen better drivers than hockey moms late to a hockey game in the parking lot. That's some really, really good driving I've seen.
Oh my goodness. I still remember when I used to ride a motorcycle, seeing my, there was a car that you know how like when you own a car, you recognize it? My wife used to have like a Mini Cooper, and she had the good one, like a 6-speed. Yeah. I see a car that looks like that coming the other direction. You know how fast a car has to be coming for you to actually be like, wow, that's fast, when they're coming the other direction?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my wife. Like when she comes over the ride and the car gets like all loose on its suspension. Yeah, like I totally agree. The school run in the morning, she's at like Mach chicken in a minivan. Yeah. I don't know if anybody around her knows that she has track time, but yeah, she's legit.
It reminds me of some of the winter driving is a lot like the state of Michigan, right? And I remember being there visiting with some friends in a large organization there in Detroit. And I had been working with this lady, C-level up there, and she asked me to come over for dinner. And it's before, this, right? So, Google Maps. And so we get in, we're driving, and I'm looking down the road. It's sort of a residential street. We're headed to it, not fast, and it's just black ice. It's shiny. And I look over at her and I say, "You got this?" And she says, "Hold my beer and watch this shit." And sure enough, we just whipped right into the driveway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. I love the idea that we got to have you in person here. We made a studio. Joel made a studio for this to happen. And it happened because you were able to come here. And I think this speaks volumes, because the reason that you're here is because sitting in front of the people is different.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah. It's funny. It was described to me this week, multiple locations I was in at multiple levels and layers and organizations, your level of client care. That felt good.
Yeah.
That felt
for
really
sure.
good.
And I understand that, because like I just went for lunch with one of your clients yesterday, and he was talking about hanging out in the pool with you in Palm Springs a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
that's a different level of care.
you got great levels of care. I got to work my way up from like the Edmonton visits to the Palm Springs visits.
Yeah.
So I'll get there.
Yeah. Well, Palm Springs is only a 2-hour flight, and I didn't have to go through 3 different, tests to test negative and whatnot, and passports and changing planes. It's easier stateside, but travel restrictions are getting released, and you guys are losing the mask mandate on March 1st. And we're going to have the chief of police for Edmonton. Is that right?
COO.
COO even more.
Yeah,
That's going to be great. That's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see to hear what he has to say. But this will be back coming remotely here, but we'll definitely look for more opportunities to bring some more live content.
Yeah, I agree. This has been great, and I think it's been great, hopefully, for you guys listening in, and to be with you in person. That just feels damn good, brother.
You betcha, man. My pleasure, and I like the fact that we got to document it. So this has been another episode of Leadership Line of Sight. I am here, as always, with my partner in crime. This is Scott Connors, Chief Change Officer of Crankset Group, helping leadership make the changes necessary to navigate what's next. And my name is Taylor. I'm the Marketing Strategist at Gravidia, a serial entrepreneur that's interested in all things business. Thank you so much for adjusting and setting the perception for your leadership line of sight with us today. Cheers.